but but I did it, and I came back to Iowa State, finished my degree, and then moved back to New York after that. So
Yeah, because
that's how
the
we
thing is, people understand, especially at that time, New York is different now than in the early 2000s. Because so I don't know if you know, I worked for Vibe magazine between junior year and senior year. Remember, I worked
I
for
do
Vibe that
remember.
summer, and
Well,
you get
wait a minute. I didn't know you were still in school though. I thought you were working for Vibe.
no, that was before I had an internship with them first,
Oh, okay, got it.
and so you got to, so you get the taste of that for a summer, and you like, man, you know what? So I relate 100% to what you,
You
and
feel
I only
me?
had 3 months. You did a whole year of that. I'm like, yo, I mean, I already know how to write. I already got awards and shit. What is they gonna do for me left? And then my grandma was like, you come when you coming back home. I was like, all right, well, I guess not.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough,
Yeah.
especially when you get the opportunity, because New York, navigating New York, as you know, is really about who you know. And
Mm-hmm.
being in New York alone, especially during that time, not right now, but being in the right place, really lends itself to you getting your next opportunity, right? So when you leave the mix and you're not in the mix and you're not in the
But
conversations
now it's
where
totally different. Then you needed
exactly.
to be in New York. Like I wanted to be a writer at the Source at Vibe. Like I needed to be there. Like I needed to be there.
Absolutely. And then you meet someone where you're working at this job and literally it lends itself to your next opportunity. So, just that FOMO of like that fear of missing out, like I got to go back to where and do what and do like accounting schoolwork, and I get to like or live my dream. So it was definitely a super hard decision at that time. I would say probably one of the most pivotal decisions that I made at that time, because it was very difficult for me to choose school over my career. But, I did it and I came back and graduated.
Do you feel
Yep.
better for it on the back end? Like looking back, like that was that the best decision you feel like, or do you think that 1 year hampered you, or are you still conflicted with it? Because I'm still conflicted with it. I'm not gonna
I,
front.
I am too. This is what I would say. I would say that I don't think that the year itself per se really hurt me, but the idea of if college was worth it for me
Hmm.
is still very conflicting, right? Just the amount of money that I paid back in loans and the amount of money that I ended up paying for my education. I don't know that until I got into like super corporate, nobody was really checking for that degree for the first 10 years of my career, or maybe 8 years of my career. Like literally they're like, oh, okay, you got a degree, great, that's nice to have, but can you do this work? Like, can you design, can you like lead a team? Like it was all about showing up and proving that you could actually do the job. It wasn't one of those industries where it's like, no, you have to have a degree in order to enter this next level of success. The fashion industry at that time wasn't really like that. It was more about your creativity and your ability to execute, right? Your ability to command creativity on demand, right? Like
Yeah.
you bring it when we need you to bring it, kind of thing. Um, and then do you have all of the technology and all of the skills that you need? But those skills could really be obtained through the job, through the learning and the experience. So sometimes I do look back and I'm like, you spent a lot of money on a degree that you really didn't use for majority of your career. But then another part of me, really, if I'm super duper honest, I would say that another part of me acknowledges that I wasn't ready to go to New York at 18. So,
Hmm.
well, I'm a little younger. So I was 17 when I graduated. And so like literally I just was literally like just turning 18 and as a freshman, so I wasn't ready for that. You know what I mean? It was just, it's too many elements. It's too much stimulation in New York for me at that young age. So I feel like it was very purposeful, and, it was very like, I want to say a growth opportunity for me to transition from high school to college to being in New York, because it was a lot. And I don't know that I would have been as successful going out there right away. So I'm torn. Like, I feel like I had a good college experience, met some great people like yourself. You know what I mean?
I mean, that's debatable. That's debatable. That's debatable. That's debatable.
Okay.
Depends on who you talk to.
But you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I understand 100% what you mean.
Non-traditional field, yeah. Like, was it really worth it? Or, but in the grand scheme of my life, I probably needed that time to transition and be ready to walk into New York and really network, grind, and be successful.
Yeah, because I could have been a dude that went out there and then it was like a fail. Because the only reason I think it was a saving grace for me with going back to school was the idea that the journalism industry got all messed up right after that. So like everything, all the magazines was folding, getting melded into other ones. Time Warner was buying a lot of them, where they was just saying, okay, we only have like 10, 15 people on the staff here that came from 100 staff and but the Time Warner bought it and said we only need 15 people over there. So now you got 85 people that are laid off. And the whole industry kept doing that, not just with the black magazines. It was magazines as a whole, Mademoiselle, all those different publications start melting down. So that I look back like, man, damn, it was good. I went back and got my degrees and everything. Like, it was good that I did,
Yeah, I mean, and I also the bitterness for me kind of came in because even after I graduated, it was still, and I like to be very transparent about this. In fact, when I had my nonprofit was really inspired by closing the gap that I experienced myself, right? So it was a gap between an information gap between what I learned in college and what I needed to know to actually get my real first job in the industry. So after college, I ended up having to intern to learn more specifically about tech packs, right? Because there are certain nuances and things about the fashion industry, technical terms, this, and that. When you're dealing with like right now, for instance, I'm working with, brands that are doing, about $900 million in sales, right? So yes, I'm at that particular time coming straight out of high school, I was an assistant, but there are certain things that I needed to know about the industry that I didn't learn at Iowa State. And it was an information gap. I didn't come out with, with a cushy job. In fact, I moved to New York and I actually really struggled. I stayed with a family friend who ended up getting into a situation, and I ended up homeless in New York for about a couple months. Where I had to figure it out, you know what I mean, kind of thing. And work for free, sleep on some couches, and then finally landed my first role. And then I've kind of been on my journey since then, but there was an information gap. So when I think about college and I think about if it really benefited or didn't benefit my career, I would say I'm still on the fence about that.
Or do you think it's different for, I guess, people that's younger now with that information gap than us because they have so much access to information? Do you think it's a difference? Like a kid now, their information gap is probably smaller, I'm assuming.
I would say it's smaller. However, for me personally, and this is, like I said, when I started my nonprofit, it was specifically for students that wanted to pursue creative industries as a career, right? And I recognize that coming from Iowa State, coming from Iowa, that I had just as much talent, but I wasn't positioned in the same way for success as a person coming from LA, right? Person coming from LA, may have known somebody that knows somebody that went to FIT, and FIT, you are an alumni amongst, with like Donna Karen and people that are in the industry that are really making noise. At that time, I didn't know anybody that had done what I wanted to do. I didn't know anybody to follow their footsteps and say, this is the next thing I needed to do. I was just figuring shit out. You know what I mean? So trying to figure it out and also not really knowing what I needed to know. Like I had a mentor, Willie Esco was actually my mentor. I don't know.
Oh man, I need to holler him for my 4-year photo shoot thing. It's this Willie Esco jacket. I know when I see it, it's North Carolina blue. It's got Esco on the back and then Esco on the front. I remember it being in the Source. Look, as anybody knows, I had every Source magazine from 93 to 2001. And I remember what page it was on, page 77 of 1997 April issue. It's a Willie Esco joint. And I was like, oh, I gotta have that.
Well, that definitely was his heyday, and I'll tell you that story another time. How I actually met him and enrolled him in being my intern. And being my mentor. But outside of it, and he was really the person that really helped me fill the gap. Like, okay, study this template and learn all of the, like I knew, again, I'm not trying to say that Iowa State didn't have a good program. They did. They just had a great program for a startup designer that was designing everything themselves, right? We were doing patterns. And again, I don't want to get too technical because I don't know if your audience really care about that.
No, some people do. You never know. So drop the juice for people that do care. Go and drop enough for the people that do care.
They were really taking us on a journey of, now looking back in retrospect, they were taking us on a journey of being like a small couture house, right? Like Paris, where you have this small brand, you're really in the room, drawing it up, making patterns and like sewing it up. You got a seamstress right here that's sewing it up and you're taking it to the runway, right? So they really trained us on that. But for mass production at that time, they didn't have tech pack templates. They didn't really know. They weren't teaching tech packs. They weren't teaching.
So no streamlining. So it's basically streamlining everything.
Exactly. They weren't teaching what the mass production companies that were doing, like what I work for and I consult for now. They weren't teaching that process. So even though I had a cool portfolio, I knew how to sew, I knew how to draw. I didn't know how to draw in Adobe Illustrator. I didn't know how to draw on the computer to the point that I could draw out, this jacket with every little small detail and every little flower or whatever. I didn't know how to do that because I didn't learn that at school. I could draw this up with some pencils, but at the end of the day, a big company was like, okay, what are we going to do with that? We need this to be, in a document that we can actually send to a factory. So there was an information gap for me, I would say. And even though I worked for Sean John, and even though I had some good experience, I still had some really key things that I needed to learn. And that created a gap of time that I really struggled when I was trying, but I was really committed and, just determined to stay in New York and figure it out. So I ended up on the homeless for a couple months trying to figure it out.
Did you tell your brother this?
Oh, he was so mad.
Because I know how your brother is.
You don't even talk about that time in my life. Really? Talk about that. Like, he's so mad. But this is what I will say. I'm a spiritually motivated, purposefully driven person, right? And I feel like there's.
And that was another thing, though. We weren't ready for that either.
Right, like
I'm telling you, I'm talking in college. I was trying to be the young gun. I was trying to be in Rockefeller. At the time, I had my white tee on, I had my chains, I had a nice long leather trench coat. That was my living. That was our living.
So what? Wait a minute. What was I trying to be in college? You
was on some other stuff though, man. You was on some other stuff that I wouldn't like. Look, man, I was like, I got time to be that serious. Come on, man. What are you throwback? And throwback jerseys was after us. I was like, at that time, I'm trying to think. I was like, man, where my Tommy coat at? My Tommy vest. I'm wearing this with my Tommy sweatpants with my right leg up on my sweatpants like that. I was like, what do you mean spirituality? What you talking about?
Well, this is what I will say about that time. Like, did my brother? No, of course he didn't. He's an older brother that's protective. Of course, he hated my father, my parents hated the fact that I was in New York and they felt like I was just being stubborn and didn't want to come back. But for me, it was sometimes we get in situations, difficult situations or unfortunate situations, and it really